Depth education. Let us continue with our learning and sharing of bonding, chemical bonding, and in this case specifically we are going to look at what we had left on the way, that is covalent type of bonding, and we already seen several examples on how covalent bonds are formed between atoms of nonmetals, which leads to the formation of an ionic a covalent compound. So now let us look at the properties of covalent compounds. Properties of covalent compounds. One, they are made up of molecules and not ions. We say that in the formation of a covalent compound, there is equal contribution of the bonding electrons and then sharing of those electrons by the atoms of the nonmetals. So there is nothing like formation of ions first, whose electrostatic forces leads to attraction, or the charges leads to attraction between those ions formed. That one is in ionic type of bonding, but with covalent type of bonding, there is nothing like formation of ions. Instead, we have got the sharing of the electrons, and then it leads to the formation of molecules. So covalent compounds are made up of molecules and not ions. So we can say they are molecular and not ionic. They are molecular and not ionic. They are made up of molecules and not ions. Two, they are mostly liquids and gases at room temperature. They are mostly liquids and gases at room temperature. We said that for ionic compounds, they are solids at room temperature. But these ones here, the covalent compounds, they are liquids and gases at room temperature. So if you look at, for example, the methane that we saw is a gas at room temperature. Carbon dioxide is a gas at room temperature. Water is a liquid at room temperature. Ammonia is a gas at room temperature. And many others. They are mostly liquids or gases. Let's use an stroke, or gases at room temperature. Next is that they are insoluble in water but soluble in organic solvents. They cannot dissolve in water. Water is an ionic compound in which water is an ionic solvent in which ionic compounds do dissolve. But in this case, the covalent compounds have to dissolve in the molecular compounds, since they themselves are also molecular. So they dissolve in the organic solvents in this case and not in water. So the covalent compounds are molecular in nature, and then they dissolve in the organic solvents, because the organic solvents are also made up of molecules and not ions. Next, they have low densities. Can you imagine? We said that they are just liquids or gases at room temperatures, and liquids and gases have got very low densities. They are soft. Just imagine, if you pick a solid and try to push your hand through, it is hard. That means that it has a high density. and that is the characteristic of ionic compounds. But with the molecular compound or the covalent compounds, in this case, they are liquids or gases at room temperature. Try water. Water is too soft. Air is too soft in this case. So, in this case, we are saying that the covalent compounds have low densities. They are not hard at all, and their particles are not densely packed. Next, they have low melting and boiling points. So most of these covalent compounds, they boil and melt in the order of negative something degrees C, a very low boiling and melting point. Let us take a simple example of water. Water melts at 0 degrees C, it's already melting, as compared to sodium chloride, which melts at 800 degrees C. Since sodium chloride is an ionic compound, but a covalent compound like water has a very low melting point, and even the boiling point is really so low. Next is, we say that they do not conduct electricity even if they are in the molten state or in the aqueous state. Or we don't talk the aqueous state. Even if they are in the solution state, or when even they are molten, they do not conduct electricity, meaning that they are said to be non-electrolytes. So these are the characteristics or the properties of covalent compounds. We need to master these characteristics very well, and so that in case you are given any data, you can be able to identify a covalent compound out of what you have been given or out of the substances, basing on the properties that, one, they are made up of molecules and not ions. You don't find ions in covalent compounds. Two, they are mostly liquids and gases at room temperature. So if it is a liquid at room temperature, that means here that the melting point is less than the room temperature. If the melting point is less than the room temperature, it means that at room temperature, you find when it has already what? Melted, it is already a liquid. And we said that if they are gases also at room temperature, it means that the boiling point is also less than the room temperature. A gas at room temperature has already boiled at a temperature which is quite less than or quite below the room temperature. So, if you have been given a data whereby you find that the melting point of a substance is less than the room temperature, or it is below the room temperature, it means that at room temperature it is a liquid. And if it has a boiling point which is below the room temperature, so at room temperature it is already a gas, then we are saying that they cannot dissolve in water, but they can dissolve in other organic solvents. Water, we say that water is an ionic solvent, and it is only ionic compounds that can dissolve in water. But these covalent compounds, since they are molecular, they dissolve in organic solvents which are also molecular. And we have talked of organic solvents. Some of them are cooking oil, that is sim oil. We have got kerosene, we have diesel, we have petrol, we have carbon disulfide, we have methyl benzene, we have tetrachloromethane, and others. All those ones are organic solvents. They are not ionic solvents like water. So in this case, covalent compounds dissolve in them. Then we say that they have low densities, and that's why, since their particles are not densely packed, at room temperature they are liquids or gases. Then they have low melting and boiling points. That's why they are also liquids at room temperature, and also some of them are gases at room temperature. If one is a liquid at room temperature, it means that its melting point is below the room temperature, and if it is a gas at room temperature, So its boiling point is also below the room temperature. At room temperature, therefore, it is a gas if the boiling point is less than the room temperature. Then we said also that they do not conduct electricity completely in any state. So they are said to be non-electrolytes. Non-electrolytes are compounds that do not conduct electricity. In this case, compounds, not elements, but compounds. We say that with the ionic compounds, they are electrolytes because they conduct electricity either in the molten state or in the aqueous state. But for the covalent compounds, no way. They don't conduct electricity. So they are said to be non-electrolytes. So these are the properties of the covalent compounds or the characteristics of covalent compounds. Tech Talks Education, thank you for watching.